Welcome, everybody, to another Sunday Open Studio. I'm here with Bettina Matzkuhn, who has artwork in our current exhibition at the gallery, Tip of the Iceberg. Welcome, Bettina. How are you doing today?
Hi, great. How are you?
I'm doing well. The weather's gotten a bit warmer, and I'm happy about that. It's a bit icy out there, but that's okay. Now, you have artwork in our exhibition. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what is showing right now in Tip of the Iceberg?
I have a few of my life jackets. They're actually a series of 7, so not all of them are there, but I started making them a few years ago, just thinking about the refugee crisis. My parents were refugees, not on boats, but I think the plight of refugees is something that seems very close. And also with, current weather events and things happening in BC. I mean, people turned out of their homes because of fires or flooding. They're refugees in a sense. So I wanted to conflate the idea of being a refugee with environmental damage, and also to imagine nature as something that needs floating, that needs some kind of nurturing. So all the life jackets are lined with images of nature that we need: shelter, food, water, that sort of thing.
Now, those images that you made are made with thread and embroidery, and I know you do a lot of work with textiles and with thread and embroidery. How did you get started making your art that way?
I see it just as a language that you grow up with. People don't wonder why I speak English, but they find it sort of odd that I work in textiles. But it's something that, my mother did, my grandmothers did. It was just around all the time. And then in grade 6, my elementary school art teacher showed us how to embroider. And it was pretty hardcore embroidery. We did a lot, and I was in a sort of after school club, and I just never looked back. It was great. So over the years, it's something that I've developed and used to talk about a lot of different things. So every culture has its textile traditions, and it's something that's familiar materially to most people, but I just see it as something that has huge potential to address many, many different things.
What do you enjoy the most about working with textiles and embroidery?
I enjoy all aspects of it. And I usually have a couple of different projects, one that's small and portable and one that's larger that stays in the studio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds familiar. I do a bit of embroidery and work myself, and it definitely takes a long time to do the bigger pieces, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's nice to have a studio so I can make a mess and spread out and um, gather all those things together that I need to work on something.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So you've prepared a video for us with some demos so people can follow along and do some work maybe similar to yours or at least a starting point. What will you be showing us in the video?
In the video, I've tried to show 3 different stitches: running stitch, chain stitch, and couching, which are really basic and not hard to do. I guess when I make something, I make a lot of little samples, because it's one thing to think that you know how to do something, and then it's another thing to actually see if it works. And the little samples are they're just experiments, and so I just want to encourage people to try it. And you can, sew it in the pocket of your jeans after, or turn it into something else. But it's fun to just experiment with materials and see what happens.
That sounds great. And I think you had a phrase for that as well, which we've made as a title for this. What was it? Take a thread for a walk?
Take a thread for a walk. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Bettina, for joining us. Everybody, watch your video and see if you too can take a thread for a walk and maybe have your stitches tell some stories. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again sometime.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Behind the life jackets is a long process. Thinking about it, gathering materials, making prototypes, making patterns, trying to figure out how to assemble things. It starts with drawings because you can redo a drawing easily enough. It's not that easy to rip out embroidery. Drawing is also a way of just getting it out of my head onto paper and then thinking about that for a while rather than making something and realizing it's not what I want. I also keep a small sketchbook, nothing fancy, but that's where I just draw, and it's like a muscle. You get better at it. Once I have a plan, I draw with kids' washable felt pens right onto the cloth. They're cheap and wash out with warm water. Over the years, I've gotten this big bucket full of samples I've made just so I can see how something works, because I can think about it all I want, but it's really important to actually make something to see if it really behaves the way I think it will. So cut up Gore-Tex, different kinds of materials, different stitches, and that way I can see what I need to change or if it actually works. And then I use them for teaching or to show people when I have exhibits. For materials, get some sharp scissors, needles with larger eyes, 6-strand embroidery thread, sewing thread, metallic thread, pearl cotton, and weird stuff your eccentric aunt might have around. It can all fit in a Ziploc bag as a portable studio. The artist Paul Klee said drawing is taking a line for a walk. So maybe embroidery is like taking a thread for a walk. Running stitch is the most basic stitch. It's sort of the ABC of embroidery. I put a knot in my thread. I don't care what the back looks like. Come up from the bottom, go down from the top, and you have a stitch. And do it again, and you've got another one. So there you go, taking your thread for a walk. You can speed things up a whole lot by going up and down in the cloth a few times. Try making little eensy teensy stitches. And then try making some big long loopy ones. Try to make a sharp turn or a spiral, and then add more next to it. Try splitting the 6-strand floss into thicker and thinner threads and sewing them side by side. You get an interesting sense of distance and texture with that. A lot of the stitching in the life jackets is just running stitch, just one next to the other. Different colors, different thicknesses. Here's the Yukon River and the White River meeting, 2 different colors of water. All those little dots are just very fine running stitch. This is a sample I made for a larger project, and the cloth is thin, so you can see the back of the stitch almost through the cloth, and it makes a line. But it's just in and out running stitch. Chain stitch is fun. It makes a bumpy sort of line. So again, make a knot in your thread, come up from the bottom, and then go back in where you came out. And you'll leave a little loop of the thread at the top and come up next door inside the loop. And pull it snug, but not too tight, and there's a chain. So go inside the loop, back where you came out, come up next door, inside that loop of thread and pull it gently. And keep doing that, and you've got yourself a line of chain stitch. And then go in and out in the same motion. As long as you're inside the loop, you'll be fine. That speeds things up a little bit. I learned to do it in grade 6, and I just never looked back. So if you want to anchor it, go down outside the loop, and that holds it fast. If you go inside the loop, it'll just unravel. This is just chain stitch with the embroidery floss split into thicker and thinner strands. So you can also try packing one against the other. So stitch a row one way and come back, and you can see that it makes a very opulent surface. This is the size of a credit card, so I would try something this size before you go on to something obsessive. This is all chain stitch. The rock has a bit of extra stuff on it, but it's all just in and out. There's nothing technically unusual about it. The life jackets have chain stitch clouds and running stitch in the sky. If you change your colors and your directions and thicknesses, you can get a lot of expressive motion in it. Look at ethnic textiles. A lot of them are running stitch or very simple stitches, and they make extraordinary surfaces. Couching is fun. Use a large needle with a large eye to anchor the end of the thread that you're couching. So usually it's some kind of metallic or thread that you can't pull through the cloth. Then with another thinner needle and thread, come up from the bottom and go down beside it and just anchor the thread you've put on top with a simple stitch. You can try using a contrasting thread like I'm doing here, or you can use a pale gray to camouflage it so you wouldn't even see it on the silver. Try making wiggly lines, straight lines. Try couching on novelty yarn, ribbon, stuff that looks like a gorilla armpit hair, boucle with little knots in it. Anything you can find in your eccentric aunt's thread box is game for couching. The hairy stuff makes good trees. I just couched it on with a black thread. I did a series of works about weather, so for the isobars in this I used bootlace cord, thick cord that I couched on, but you can also see there's chain stitch and running stitch. For these little fireweed seeds, I just used a really fine thread and couched it on. These are tree roots, couching again, different thicknesses. I'm working on something about rain, so I've tried with sheer fabric underneath it, couching and running stitch. I've used dark material, light material, just to see what it looks like and to live with it for a while. So this piece, I wanted to do an embroidery about a trail I've done many times. I used 20 different colors of embroidery thread, one over the other, just a running stitch, to get that sense of having walked the same path. And this is just a sample. I wanted to see what it was like. It has its own personality. It's quite thick. For the trees, I used couching with the green and then a contrasting color thread, and then ran that line of stitching one over the other as it winds through the landscape. Embroidery is more than taking a thread for a walk. It can be a full-on adventure. So make lots of experiments and have fun. See where it takes you.